As we tease coming out, new pods, who dis? As Sports Illustrated and Ross Dellinger put out, and what you can be described as educated guess on what the SEC 3 permanent opponents could be when you move to a 9-team schedule. And it makes sense, Jake, because it was, or at least the Alabama portion of this was confirmed by Nick Saban over the weekend, as Nick Saban said, quote, and to be clear, Nick Saban has always, I'm almost a bit, well, I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say I'm surprised, because Nick has always been more than willing to advocate for what he wants publicly, right?
Oh,
but
yeah.
one of the things that he's always advocated for is for teams to play more big-time games, to get rid of cupcake games, to play good out-of-conference games, to play more conference games. Like, he has been a fan of this, but apparently he's not a fan of what the SEC is trying to get him to play in this new look SEC coming to 2024. He says, quote, I've always been an advocate for playing more conference games, but if you play more games, I think you have to get the 3 fixed opponents right. They're giving us Tennessee, Auburn, and LSU. I don't know how they come to that. And then he goes on to talk about how, look, they're using a 10-year study. And granted, Tennessee hasn't been good in that 10 years, but if you look at a 25-year study, LSU, Auburn, Alabama would be at the top of the West, right? And then Florida, Tennessee, and Georgia would be at the top of the East. And he's saying, oh, well, why we got to play all the top teams? But I guess and here's what he said. So I recognize that when I say this, I know he's not being too literal when he says, I don't know how they come to that decision. But if you're listening and you're saying, I don't know how they come to that, it's obvious how they did. Those are the best matchups. I mean, right? They want to make no mistake. They want to make it equitable to a point where nobody can sit there and clearly stamp their feet. Like in these pods that Sports Illustrated put out, Auburn gets Georgia, Alabama, and then Vanderbilt.
Yeah.
Right? So they want to have it at least where nobody can play too much. But the main thing, guys, it's
Georgia.
TV. It's TV money. It's driven by TV money, okay? And so are you going to get rid of LSU-Alabama, the game that CBS took as their night game for 7 or 8 years running, the game that does numbers every single year? That would be the height of stupidity. As the SEC is trying to renegotiate in good faith with ESPN, you're going to say, oh, and we don't want LSU and Alabama to play every year anymore. And if I'm an LSU fan, I said this on that Zootful day on Friday, which is you took a lot of ass whoopings to get to a point where now it finally feels like you've leveled the field a bit. I don't want to get rid of this game now. You went through the dark times, and I'm not saying you're not going to lose, because it's going to be a close run.
But now you started to come out on the other side of this thing.
Yeah, so let's keep this thing going a little bit, dude. Saban getting older, Kelly on the run.
Yeah, remember, LSU won 5 of these in a row as well in the early 2000s. It's that portion of it's been done before as well. So LSU's Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Alabama. The Alabama, it makes too much sense.
I love it.
There might be people that disagree with that, but that game, just like T-Bob said, it moves the needle too much. It's a game that people that are just college football fans come to that game every year. Every year, when you go on the sideline of an Alabama-LSU game, it is the who's who. Even when LSU's been a 14-point underdog or whatever it was in 2021, no, that game brings stars to that game, because everybody knows that's who they're going to be watching on Sunday. So, you might not like it, but that game was never really going to go away. Now, Ole Miss, everybody could kind of see that one coming as well. A&M, it still feels forced to me.
I think you're in the minority here.
I don't think I'm in the minority. I think it's probably split down the middle. I know you. So
this is Make a Trust poll question of the day?
There we go, yes. we'll come up with how to word that. And I know that game to you, you're an A&M, you and Hunt, and I understand it.
But you got to understand, I never even thought about Texas A&M until I would have played them in 2010. I just never even thought about them as a school. And then you played in 2010.
There is a history there from when Gordy played. Gordy talks about Texas A&M
I didn't know about any of that, is what I'm saying. So I came to this thing as And I look, when it was being created, I lamented it as being like corporate and forced and unorganic and all this stuff, but it hooked me. Somewhere along the line, the game hooked me.
Okay, well, would you rather have A&M or Florida, I guess is my question. And as much as you're on that A&M, look, I know I'm biased towards LSU and Florida. Like, yeah. I'm not blind to the fact that that is a game that I look forward to more than any game on the schedule every single year. Right, you've had fog and a thrown cleat. You've had special teams plays where you throw a fake field goal, it bounces up to the kicker. You've had the fourth down game. You've had guys being stopped on the 1 yard line. You've had games being moved because of hurricanes. I mean, that game has drama, it has hate, and it has weird, unique plays in it.
I agree. I think that as you reforge the SEC, it's nothing about the game itself working against it. I think it's more about all the external factors that, like, geographically, well, yes, LSU's trying to go into Florida just to compete over the same guys. It's not close to the geographical confrontations of LSU and A&M, right? I mean, the thing I keep going back to, LSU's largest alumni fan base is in Houston. I know so many Tiger fans over there in Houston that have to live surrounded by Aggie fans, right? And that game means so much to them because it's basically bragging rights, going into work, going into school for the rest of the year. Florida, I mean, who does Florida have on this list? They have... Let me find it. Georgia, South Carolina, and
Oklahoma.
Okay, so that's a bit...
Hey, random. Here's Oklahoma.
So I was going to say, it's not even like necessarily then that Florida has any other major opponents that are demanding attention. I think it simply just comes down to geography, honestly, as far as kind of what because I think both have juice. I think Florida definitely has more history.
How in the hell is Florida and Tennessee not playing each other?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like, if you're going to give Florida, like, a third game, it should be Auburn or it should be Tennessee. Like, Auburn and Florida was a big rival. Like, talk to Chris Doering. He'll tell you, like, that was a series that they cared about, and then they just went away. Tennessee and Florida, I would say, in the late 90s, early 2000s, like, Tennessee, Florida was kind of LSU-Alabama.
Yes. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that was the big boy. I wonder look, I think it's just, I think at this time it's a lot of hard decisions have to be made to create a schedule like this. And while that game was awesome for a time, just on balance, obviously the only one they really cared about keeping was Florida, Georgia. And for better or worse, it looks like with LSU.
It's Georgia, Florida. You should know this. Co-hosting with someone that went to Georgia. Whoever wins the game gets first billing.
Yeah, but I refuse to I refuse to respect their culture. I'm a xenophobe, and I'll leave mine. But no, I actually do that purposefully to disrespect them because they get very upset about it.
I used to do a lot of shows with Aaron, and I would say the same thing, and he would stop me every single time.
Okay, but look, so outside of losing LSU Florida, which is a bona fide bummer, there's no way around that. I do love LSU's permanent 3 because, like I said, I think the A&M game does have a ton of juice. Also, A&M, well, they're constantly kind of threatening to be good. They're not that good still, and they've never been that good in their history.
Yeah.
So maybe you get unlucky and they get great and go on some kind of crazy run, but chances are that's going to be a relatively favorable opponent, right? Ole Miss, same thing. They may be pretty good right now for Ole Miss, but if you look at their history, I mean, they're going to enter the new age SEC without ever having made it to Atlanta out of the West, right? That's a favorable matchup. And then, of course, Alabama's not what you would deem favorable, but is the most exciting matchup of the past probably 10, 15 years if you look at the SEC and what has mattered most. So I think this is a very good draw just from a pure LSU perspective.
Gosh, my 318 brethren actually agree with Hunt here. 3 biggest rivalry games lost are LSU, Florida, LSU, Auburn, and Florida and Tennessee. LSU, Auburn, that's a good call, Hunt, because LSU and Auburn, I mean, if it wasn't for Florida during my time, and maybe some of yours as well, T, that was the rival. Like, we were 2-2, the home team won every single time, and they were just weird as hell. Every game. I think there was one that was 7-5. I think there was one, like, my freshman year, missed extra point, and then Ronnie Prude got called for jumping on a teammate, which I've never heard called again after that. They get another chance and they make it. They win the game. Like those games, I mean, we could go back. We know the barn burning, the whole deal. That is a rivalry game that you are losing. And Auburn LSU, like even in recent years, like Auburn hasn't been as good, but the games have been, even in 19.
Yeah, they're the only ones that tried.
That game was highly competitive.
Yeah, it's I mean, certainly when I was in junior high and high school in the Saban era, that was the game deciding the West. The same way that it later became LSU-Alabama, it was LSU-Auburn at that time. I mean, LSU-Auburn, you could probably make the argument that's an even bigger loss than Florida. I don't know if I would say that because
crazy now.
Because I think the Swamp is the worst part about this is you're not going to get to visit the Swamp every other year, which is an awful place to play, but that's why it's a wonderful place to play. But yeah, those are I think Hunt's right. But again, guys, these are like you can't have your cake and eat it too. You want to move into the new era of college football. You want to have the big-time SEC. You want your 9 conference games, but you still want to play every team twice within a 4-year stretch. Like, this is just these are the breaks. And tough. You have to do a tier system when it comes to rivalries. And as good as those are, they're probably tier 2 compared to the tier 1s. Like, I would say LSU-Alabama is probably a tier 1 rivalry.
I would take LSU, Auburn, LSU, Florida over LSU and A&M. I might be in the minority, like you said, but those games, to me, have way more juice. Is there juice to the A&M thing? There is. And certainly when you go back into years before A&M joined the SEC, I do realize that. In the overtime game, all that got created. There's juice there, but not as much as Florida and Auburn. And I get it is schedule balancing, and Auburn right now, what was it, T? You told me earlier, like Auburn's got an absolute bear.
Well, no, so they got Georgia, Alabama,
yeah.
but then they threw, but like before it was supposed to be like Georgia, Alabama, and then was it LSU maybe? Some were still saying before? I don't know. It looked like in some other proposals they had the toughest 3 possible.
So that is another aspect of this. Like, you're not getting rid of the Iron Bowl. We get that. Auburn and Georgia, the South's oldest rivalry.
Exactly.
So I understand that. So, like, we can't give them LSU. So I understand that part of it. I guess with me, it is the Florida. They got South Carolina and Oklahoma. I'm like, what is that going to do for Florida fans? Oklahoma might become something, but they're so far away from each other. You're not fighting for a lot of the same recruits. There's not a lot of ties there. And
that to me, Jake, when I look at this list, because this is proposed, like that Florida-Oklahoma feels like a matchup that maybe isn't set in stone. Like there's a few edge case games where I could see them being like, let's maybe shift this around. Like maybe this one doesn't necessarily need to be played. I'm trying to glance over the list and see maybe some other ones in that regard. Missouri Vanderbilt's kind of interesting, but I mean in terms of like games that don't really matter that much.
Kentucky's 3 are like what? Mississippi State, South Carolina, and Georgia.
I mean, you got to cut these teams. Who is Kentucky's football rival?
They got to have Tennessee or Vandy in there, right?
Oh yeah. Well, but Vandy is being used simply as the kind of who can we help out a little bit, right? like Tennessee got
Vandy, Alabama, South Carolina.
So like, okay, they got Alabama. Let's give them Vandy. We know they did that with Auburn, and then as a bit of a nod to Vandy, they give them Mizzou to be like, okay, this is a little bit of where you're kind of each going to help each other's schedule get a little bit easier. Look, we'll see. And again, even if I'm not going to sit here and say the LSU A&M game has better history or drama than the Florida game, because it definitely does not. I mean, probably my favorite moment of LSU football over the last 5 years could be Cade York's trench run, the kick that blew up the swamp through the incredibly dense fog. But I just think economically going forward, it makes a lot of sense to continue to foster the LSU A&M rivalry. It's easier for the fans to both travel to and whatnot. So I think it's tough, man. Push comes to shove. These are the decisions that
that is not a message that is endorsed by Off the Bench. That is T-Bob Hebert and T-Bob Hebert alone.
Well, me and the SEC.
Okay,
me and Greg.
But that is something that they've tried to make a thing for more than a decade now. So
yeah, and I think it got made though. I think every now and then corporations stumble into success.
It got made, but not to the point of some other games was my whole point. I know it has juice now. There's no question about it. But that's going to be our poll question of the day. Which one of these teams in football would you want to see LSU play more every year? A&M, Florida, or Auburn?
Yeah, there you go. Put it on the poll, Mario. That'll pretty much anything else in this pod system, Jake, before we leave behind for today?
Yeah, real quick. Who do you think basically has the most difficult road, and who do you think got a pass? Because
Auburn having Alabama, Georgia at this point just feels like two automatic losses.
Alabama might actually, with Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU.
They probably actually have the hardest road, which is what Saban's talking about.
I know things can change, and some teams that have been good historically are not good right now, but that feels like a pretty difficult one. Even Texas, like Oklahoma, A&M, and Arkansas. Okay, you don't really have, depending on how Arkansas bounces back.
Yeah, that's tough, boy. The best part about it is still that at least you're going to play everybody every other year, right? So, yeah, we're not going to LSU Florida every year, but we're still going to get it. And when you get it, think about it. Bragging rights for 2 years on the line. You ain't going to get another shot to get that revenge that next year. So you get your ass kicked. You're going to have to be in it for a while, which I'm definitely looking forward to a bit. All right, let's move on, unless you want to add anything on the way out here.
Yeah, so Chris Doering only has to dress like a clown every other year instead of every year.
Exactly.